Okay, gang, big thanks to everybody for picking up a MetriCKs car. Most of you will be getting them this week. Thought we'd do a couple of quick videos on some of the more tricky items. Really simple car to build. A couple items are a little different, a little tricky, so we thought we'd do a couple quick videos. So here we go. For this first step, we're going to put these two 3x6 set screws down into the top and just leave them loose for now. And then we're going to run the pivot screws up through the chassis and into the upper plate. We've already done the rear pivot screw here, and you can see the front is just loose. So I'll grab the front pivot screw, which is a pivot screw, a cup, and a washer. That just simply goes through the hole and threads into the upper plate. And we're going to snug it down. We're not going to go crazy, but just snug it down 2-finger tight. And just, make sure that it's reasonably tight. That's what we're doing now. And that's snug. We'll do the back one. That's snug. And because the set screws on the top are loose, there's a lot of play in the upper and lower. You can see it kind of bouncing back and forth and up and down. And that play will be taken out with the set screws. So these set screws on the top will just be brought down just so they touch. So we'll just bring these down. And when they just touch, the upper plate will be free, but not bound and pivot really smooth. So I'm going to over tighten them on purpose. And I just snugged them a little too far. And you can see the upper plate isn't happy. It doesn't pivot real, it doesn't wiggle or slap around, or it doesn't pivot very good at all. So now we'll just take and loosen these just slightly, and again, we're just getting these set screws just a touch with and remove any of the play up and down. And of course, all of these screws should have a little Loctite on them. So now that we've got it correct, you can see a nice free pivot, and it's just really very free in the pivot system, and there's no play in the screw going up and down. So that pivot is basically done, and you can see from the side here that set screw is just touching the carbon, and that's what you're after. And again, all those screws there should have a little drop of Loctite. Just to okay, even though we've used some Loctite, we're going to go ahead and put some lock nuts on those pivot screws, and just a matter of putting a lock nut on top. So be sure to hold the bottom screw when tightening the lock nut up on top. And then that next step is really super simple. Just these little spacers go on top of the battery plate. And the only reason we're showing it here is they're just spacers. You don't need to crank down on this very tight. You're just going to run these M3x5 flatheads up through into the plastic spacer and just really lightly snug it. It's just taking up space, no structural worry, no need to reef on it, no need to go crazy. Just simply thread it in and just 2-finger tight. It isn't going anywhere. It's going to be compressed between the upper plate and the chassis. So really no need to go crazy with it. So a piece of cake there. Just one thing to note on these little spacers is you want this flat side. That's where the battery is going to go in. You see the rounded edges here, and the flat side will go inside toward the battery. The next step in this is the extension limit screw 3080 is going to go up into the bottom of the chassis, or battery plate, sorry. And that's super simple. Just keep it square and true, and just thread that stop screw up in, and it's really quite simple. Just make sure it's pass flush so you don't have anything dragging underneath the car. And basically the battery plate's ready to bolt onto the upper chassis. Here we're going to bolt the battery plate to the upper chassis with these 3x8s. These are going in aluminum, so a little Loctite wouldn't hurt to keep that secure in the aluminum. And again, it's just nothing more than threading these in. Super simple. And just get them snug tight, and the battery plate is on the upper chassis. And this is the battery plate attached to the upper chassis with the 4 M3x8s. And you got your extension limit screw there, pivots, battery plates in, and kind of already looking like half a car. Okay, now we're putting the pod onto the chassis. Really simple, kind of just a bolt together situation. The only thing tricky is this set screw going into the carbon. Needs the thread in straight and true. A little Loctite or even grease will get that going easier. It's a super easy install. The hole is sized very simply to just thread that in and keep it square and true, and then you'll know you're about at the right length when the back here is flush with the back of the carbon. You should have 7.5 millimeters from the tip down to the carbon. It's shown right here in the instructions, 7.5. If this screw is sticking out too far, it will hit your battery, so this is key to keep an eye on. It's not going to really loosen per se, but you may not put it in far enough at the beginning. So be sure that this is in so that there's only 7.5 and you shouldn't see it hit the battery once the car is built. Then you're just going to continue on with this. Put the ball studs on, screw it into the motor plates, and this whole assembly will go on to the chassis as shown down here. Just be sure to use the 3x5 millimeter flatheads here. Don't use anything longer. That'll cause an issue. And as always, whenever you have a metal screw going into a metal piece, a little drop of Loctite won't hurt. Again, metal button head coming down into the metal motor plate, a little Loctite. This is a 2.2 thick spacer for ride height. That's what comes in the kit. And we offer a thinner and a thicker. This will get you going around 40 millimeter tires and 3.5 to 4 millimeters of ground clearance. A good start. So the team when we race is typically only on the stock one at 2.2. Typically works good, but we do have a couple adjustments there. So that's about it for the rear pod. One word of note when you're putting the pod to the chassis is keep all of the screws a little bit loose until the 4 screws that hold the pod onto the chassis are secure. You'll see that the pod locates or keys into the chassis, kind of clicks in, and then you can secure it with the screws from the bottom. And then once these 4 are tight underneath, and then you can go ahead and tighten all the auxiliary screws around it, like these 2 in the front and these 4 in the back. That'll just keep things real tweak-free, square, and really bulletproof. You see here's your stop screw sitting right above your adjustment, and your spring's going to come down and touch that. So that completes the pod. Okay, onto the UltraTune front end, and yes, welcome to the best front end in 1/12 scale racing. We've got quite a really unique front end in the sense that very easy to change caster and camber. We use the 1/8 inch bearings for more durability. Here's a brand new one with no polishing, and it's just fit and finish is top notch, nice and smooth. Hollow kingpin to hold more fluid. Works really well. Got the aluminum collar, Delrin machine bushings, 1/8 inch steel axle that threads in to the steering block. And we'll go ahead and put this all together. Here's some of the magic of the UltraTune front end. This is your CC plate. Car is going to come with a 4-caster -1 camber plate. And that'll machine match right into the upper chassis. And you're going to use 2 M3x5 screws with a little dab of Loctite on them to hold those. Snug it down pretty good. And the basis of the front end is now on. You'll do that for the right side, but we've got a whole range of camber caster plates, 4 with just 0.25 negative all the way up to 4 with -2 degrees camber. And we got the same thing pretty much in 5-degree caster as well. So that's a bolt on and go, and the basis of the front end. Kingpin will go on there in the steering block, and we'll be off to the races. Okay, following along with the instructions, you're going to bolt your 4-1 camber caster plate to your upper chassis plate. And then, of course, your steering block, which is, we already put all the bushings and collars together, will come down over the kingpin. But one thing tricky is trying to hold the kingpin while you're tightening it. So we give you a body clip, so use it as a wrench. Stick the body clip through the hole, get yourself a good 2 mil, and just use the body clip as your wrench and give it a good crank. Of course, a drop of Loctite will help there. And now that's good and tight, and we can move on. These little 5mm spacers are 0.75 thick. They're a good start for ride height. You can use 1 or 2 of them. They come with a 1, again, pretty good for 40mm, 39mm front tires. You can change the ride height by putting a spacer there. You can also change the ride height in the front by changing the amount of washers in the pivot. So you can leave this washer and raise the whole upper deck a little bit. Yes, you're raising the weight of the Speedo a little bit to change ride height that way, but you can do it. So you can change the front ride height here with a washer, or actually you can raise the upper deck a little bit. Again, if you raise the upper deck, you'll have to readjust your set screws. So per the instructions, we're going to use that 0.75mm, and then put the steering block over. And again, super smooth, no play. Now, here's a trick. You're going to want a nut driver that totally is able to go over the hole, have it nice bore deep so you can go over and catch it. And you can actually use your kingpin as your wrench. And this is something you definitely want a good Loctite on, and you want to tighten this one. Put some heat on this one and tighten it really secure, because a little Loctite and a good twist to get that good and tight will keep that axle on for good. And basically that's, you can see your ride height washer in there. Super free, super smooth. And if you want to get it even better, you can polish that kingpin. So far, the fit and finish has been right on the money. Don't really need to. But if you want to use some others, you can make that even better. Okay, again, following along with the instructions, we're just going to drop the 55 front spring on. And we're going to go with our top screw to hold everything together. And if you want to play with preload, we're going to have a fine-tune video and some instruction on how to fine-tune the front end. Right now, you could use a 5mm shim on top and actually preload the front spring. There's a number of ways to do it. Certainly a 5mm shim will tighten that up. But right now, we're just going to go with stock preload, which is just the washer and the button head from the top. And again, metal to metal, make sure you're using a drop of Loctite, and instantly you have 4 caster and -1 camber. No setup gauge, it's machined in. This kingpin don't spin. Yeah, we've hit some walls really hard. Yeah, I'm sure you can bend it. We haven't yet, but we will. But stays really true even in a big accident. So front end's proven to be excellent. All right, so we're going on to the servo mount. You just got to finish up the front end, and you'll end up with both sides on with the springs on both steering blocks. And now we're going to move to this area where the roll springs. These are going to thread into the servo plate, the carbon servo plate. First thing you got to do is get the this assembly together. And you're going to get this set screw flush with the bottom of the spring holder. Nothing to it, pretty much just like the instructions said. So You're going to run that set screw into the spring holder. And when the bottom of the set screw is flush, that's good and far enough. That's what I'm doing here. Now let me take it out. Yeah, it's about flush. Pretty close. Let's go a little further. And then, without putting the spring on, basically, you have to determine if you want your servo left or right at this point. It's shown with the base of the servo to the right in the car. So we'll go ahead that way. I like to put the wrench through and bring your set screw from the bottom. And just push with your finger, and you're just trying to keep it square and straight. Again, a little bit of Loctite or even grease, anything to help that set screw get in the carbon. And that does that. And then you're going to pop your spring on. And then you're going to measure from the bottom of the spring to the underneath of the carbon should be 12 mil. That's just a start. Once we get it all on and tweak the car, that'll change, but you're going to start with the bottom of the spring to the bottom of the carbon, 12 mil. Do that for both sides, and mount to the rest of the servo. We're not going to show everything. It's pretty much listed here. You got your tie rods. It's all pretty straightforward. I suggest you start with the inner hole, or I'm sorry, the outer hole towards the outside of the car. That'll give you more steering. And that'll be your front end. All right, moving on to the tweak assembly. Again, these videos are just to highlight some of the more tricky items. The car build's really straightforward, and we're not going over every step. But anything that might need a little extra care or a note, we're trying to target in these videos. Here, the center spring is much like the roll springs. You'll put the set screw into the spring holder, much like we did on the roll spring, so that the set screw is flush with the bottom of the spring holder. And then again, just like the roll spring, we'll put our wrench through the carbon, and we'll put the set screw here, and then draw it in, basically unscrewing it. Again, a dab of Loctite or grease. We'll just make that go in smooth and just try to keep it straight. Pushing with my thumb and just kind of drawing it in. And once we get that in square, again, same 12 millimeter gap between the bottom of this carbon plate and the end of the spring when we push the spring on. So that'll be the same. That'll be adjusted later, and that spring will sit right on that center post that we installed earlier. The other thing on this step is, you see here highlighted in the blue, you might want to just take the sharp edge off in this area with an X-Acto, anything to deburr it. Don't have to do it, but it makes the assembly a little better. And then what we're going to go on to next is the vertical dampers. I'm going to pop the damper ball into the damper cup. And then this is the damper rod. And we'll push that up through, put a little Kyosho grease on it. And that'll be our damping. Kyosho grease seemed to be a little bit superior than the silicone lubes. They don't leak down. They stay consistent. Silicone lubes will work, but we find that the Kyosho grease works really well. At the recent Trinity shootout, we tried 15K Kyosho and 30. We came back to the 15K. 30 was pretty heavily damped, so we've got plenty of damping in the side damper. So let's go on and pop that together. We've got the vertical damper, the 3 pieces. Super simple. You can use the CRC ball popper tool to both assemble and disassemble this little cup, the 4279 CRC. But you can see here, all we're going to do is put this ball in the cup and use our pliers and really just a little squeeze, little pop, boom, that's it. And that spins free. And then we'll take our plate that we deburred, we'll push this up through the bottom, simple, and then we'll grab our retaining spring E-clip, and we'll put that in from the side here. You can just push it in with a tool, pretty simple, and there's your rotating vertical damper cup. And of course this rod here will go in and get some syrup on it and be your damper. These will pop over this ball down here, and when the car rolls, it is damped. Okay, now it's simply a matter of putting these standoffs down to the battery plate with these M3x6 flatheads. A little Loctite might be a good idea here on those screws. Run them up into these standoffs. Remember, this is the MetriCKs, so this is 4.5 millimeter standoffs. You'll need a hex wrench to hold them, and you'll end up with something like this. And then your top plate will go on from above, like that. But before we do that, we got to pop on the damper rod. So the damper rod goes over the ball, and then just snap on. Can't really see it. Get into focus. Just click it on here. And then put that up through there. We use a 3x6 button for the back screws. Pretty easy. I'm only showing one damper here. And then another M3x6 button. And then your battery bar, which holds in your battery. This is where your battery bar will go here. And I've cut my battery bar. I'm cheating. Your battery bar will come complete. I turned mine into a battery door because, yeah, I'm lazy. So when I take my battery out, I just loosen this screw a little bit here. Loosen it, and loosen this screw a little here. And your battery will go in and out this door if you choose to do that. Because I never hit anything when I race. Haha. So far I haven't had any problems, but you can turn this into a battery door, but this will come to you closed and it will bolt here. And if we switch over to look at our center spring is resting on our center pivot post, and then our extension set screw, which is going to limit the amount that the chassis pulls when you hit the gas, how much down travel you get, if you will. How much like that. That's what that set screw adjusts. This is the preload on how much the car will sag into its suspension. This screw will adjust your battery height. The more you tighten it, it'll lift the battery up. And then for damping, I just like to use Kyosho grease. I like to kind of squish that, put that right in there, and just kind of work it in. So after you've put your Kyosho grease on your damper, you can put your damper cap on. And that should keep it packed in there. Some of the guys have been putting grease in the cap and then putting it over, but that's damped pretty well. And that throws some body mounts on it, and we're getting pretty close to having a car. Over and out.